Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Today's warehouse needs to keep inventory moving smoothly and quickly. Meet these challenges with on-demand warehouse labeling from Brother Mobile Solutions. Our mobile and industrial printers will help optimize your operations to achieve the speed, reliability, and durability your warehouse needs. With easy integration for existing warehouse technology, convenient portability, and upfront affordability, Brother Mobile Solutions is at your side when it comes to warehouse labeling. Try one for free today by visiting brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse or click the link in the show notes. That's brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse to try one for free today.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Glynn LoPresti. He is the co-founder and CEO at Takt. And Takt is focused on giving you better insights into your labor and that labor management side and helping you to become more effective and overall more productive as well. So Glynn and I have been connected for a little while now. We've been running into each other at a bunch of trade shows. So it's great to get him on the podcast here as well. So Glynn, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. Yeah, I think it was probably almost a year ago that you and I met, and the New Warehouse Podcast has absolutely exploded. So congratulations to you. But
Thank you.
More importantly, I am excited and appreciate you having me on the show.
Definitely happy to get you on. Definitely like the Takt solution and what you guys are trying to address. I mean, I think it's a very, very good problem to tackle. But why don't we hear from you? I guess tell us a little bit about you're the co-founder over there, right? So tell us a little bit about your kind of the idea of Takt and where it really comes from, and how did you come to found this company ultimately?
Yeah. So for us, I think it was the fact that there are more warehouses, distribution and fulfillment operations than at any time in history.
Yeah.
And you've got more under construction every single day. And yet, despite all that growth, what we see is the operational tools, the methodologies that are deployed in these facilities have been pretty stagnant for a decade or more. But what really has changed for these operations and changed pretty quickly, if we're being honest, are both the challenges that are facing the operations, but also the expectations that have been placed on these operations, whether that is the rise of omni-channel fulfillment and third-party logistics, where you all of a sudden have to be able to manage profitability and cost to serve for multiple tenants. You've obviously got skyrocketing labor rates and plummeting labor availability. Customers that are expecting 2-day and same day delivery, returns moving into these operations when in many cases that used to be separate, and even new regulations coming out of California, Washington about engineering standards and warehouse quotas. But I think probably one of the biggest ones is the incoming workforce, the incoming millennial and Gen Z workforce, the group that we are looking to take over for the retiring and outgoing workforce, has a very, very different set of expectations and a very different relationship with work. And I think we saw that as you put all of this together, there's sort of this perfect storm happening, and the need to do more with less is sort of been, it's now greater than ever. And you're in this industry. Have you seen similar types of challenges in the operations that you've worked in and lead?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, I think, it's certainly something that's going on right now. And when even as I'm teaching too, students as well, which I guess would be Gen Z, right? At this point, I mean, the idea of, going to work in a warehouse and pick and pack orders is something that's like, it's not something really I'm really interested in. Right. But so it's kind of more focused on that tech side and being able to make it easier. And I think even too, I mean, you see people that have, like you said, I mean, there's an abundance of warehouses everywhere, and you get these pockets within the country where there's multiple warehouses, and you have people that have, they've worked at this warehouse on the street, and they've worked at this warehouse, and they worked at the one next door. And so they see all these different, I guess, workflows and technology that some warehouses have. And, there's certainly people that have become savvy to that, and they're going to work, at this one because the tech is better and it makes the job easier in a sense than like, going to work at this one and they're still picking on paper and they're still doing this, and the job gets, is more challenging and they can't be as productive and things like that. So I think it's certainly a thing that a lot of warehouses are not facing already, but going to face more and more, as you said, as like these newer generations come into the workforce and are supposed to be taking over these jobs, but don't necessarily want to take over their jobs, I guess you could say, right?
Absolutely. And so that's what we saw. And that's exactly what we set out to build with Takt was, I mean, Takt, for everybody that's listening, is a warehouse labor management and intelligence platform. And what we really do is take all of the data that's flowing through these facilities already. So the WMS data and the time clock data, but also automation and robotics data. And then we combine that with very powerful tools and analytics with really a singular goal. And that's to provide real-time visibility, but I would say even more so, actionable intelligence to the people at all levels of the organization. And I think we're talking about operators and managers on the floor, engineers and continuous improvement teams, but all the way up to facility leaders and even network executives that are looking across these facilities, because our job, I guess, in the simplest terms, is to create productive, efficient, and resilient warehousing operations to do exactly like we said, do more with less. That's what you got to figure out how to do today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a key thing is like, how do you do that more with less? And one of the ways to do that is to first get those insights and get that understanding of, how am I actually performing right now and where are there opportunities to perform better? I mean, so tell us a little bit, I guess, how Takt kind of comes into that and is able to provide those insights initially and give you some better visibility, I guess, into what's actually going on. Because I think even, we talk about doing less with more, and you look at
we want to do more with less.
Or do more with less. Yeah. Sorry. Do more with less, right? And you have even larger buildings, but you have less leadership in place. Like you only have so many supervisors or warehouse managers, and maybe you got 5 managers for 100 people. That's like, how are you supposed to keep eyes on all of them at the same time? So how does Takt kind of give that visibility initially and give you an understanding what's really going on in your warehouse?
At the highest level, it starts by measuring everything that's productive in these operations. We say labor management as part of what Takt is, but we're tracking much more than just the human capital in there. We're tracking labor, we're tracking automation, robotics. We have to view all of that as part of the same team. They are all focused on the same ultimate goal. But what we've seen is, as you augment your human capital with additional automation or robotics, we see people looking at more screens, right? There's more stuff to pay attention to really understand. And any individual screen or system that you're looking at is really only providing a partial view of the operation. And so our approach to measuring everything that's productive, not just the labor, is very intentional. And I'll give you a great example. If you're really only looking at labor, or you're only looking at your goods to person dashboard, you may have effectively 10x your pick process with a new goods to person investment, but maybe you're not seeing the significant increase in overall UPH or CPU that you would have expected. And maybe your pack team is now underwater. But the point is that you have to look at all of these productive elements as a whole. Now, we do focus heavily on labor, but that's also, there's a very good reason for that. At this point in time, for the vast majority of people, labor still represents by far and away the largest producer within these operations, and also in most cases the largest potential for waste. And so a heavy portion of our platform focuses on measuring and identifying opportunities with labor. However, there's a unique way we approach that. And there's a heavy focus in our platform on better engaging and motivating the workforce. And I think historically, tools and programs like Takt have been used to measure and put a number over the folks in these operations' heads so that you could go identify the bottom 20% and then you replace them. But with the current labor availability and competition for labor, that's not a viable approach anymore. But maybe even more important is it's the wrong way to motivate a workforce. And so when we set out to build Takt, one of the guiding principles, if you will, that was that we're going to do things a little bit differently with regard to the measurement and accountability that we place on operators and the frontline workforce. And so we still have data and metrics. We have tons of it, but there's a heavy focus on providing that data within context and presenting a fair and accurate representation of the individuals and teams that are out there doing the work. If you don't provide it in context, I might say, hey, Kevin, explain yourself. I'm seeing you at 57% utilized today. Well, in the absence of context, you might say, hey, that's terrible. Yeah. But if I've got twice as many people in the organization or in the operation today than I have orders to actually justify, that there's nothing you could do about that. And so I think there's a heavy focus on that. And there's this realization that if you want to drive real improvement in these facilities, you have got to engage the workforce. And so a lot of what we do is also focused on helping managers better communicate and provide feedback about where people are, where they're proficient, where there are opportunities for growth. Because as you mentioned, there's a lot of competition for labor. And as far as I can tell, engagement is in most cases the only thing that stands between your operation and a revolving door of people that'll leave the first time the one next door offers 50 cents an hour more. So, yeah.
I think that makes so much sense to give that whole perspective and the whole picture. Because like you said, I mean, you look at your example, 57% utilization, you're like, what is this person doing? Right. And, like what's going on here? But when you look at the big picture, like, there wasn't enough work for them to be fully utilized. Right. So, I mean, I think that's a great thing. And I think too, I want to kind of dig in here a little bit with you and understand, I mean, because when I imagine when you first come into a facility operation company, like there's maybe sort of a loose understanding of what does an expected performance of an employee look like, a picker, for example, right? Like we expect that the picker should do, X amount of lines in an hour or units in an hour, whatever the case may be. But maybe that's something that hasn't been looked at in a couple years, right? Maybe they invested the time to do the time study and the engineering, whatever, like 3, 4, 5 years ago. Right. And since, the business has changed and things are different. So, I mean, how does that kind of initial assessment and how does that go? And what kind of, factors and levers are you looking at there to be able to come up with those baselines? And then how do they, kind of adjust and change over time as like the business evolves and things change?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is one of the biggest challenges to implementing a tool or a program like Takt. We can help you. We're not the engineers that come in and do the time studies and put FP&A on time and things like that. If our customers have existing engineers or an existing consultant that comes in and does that, those are all feeds into our platform. What we can do is compare that against the reality of the population and point out for those engineers when you've got an expectation that by all indications is unattainable or in some cases soft. Humans don't react well to either situation where you go to them and say, well, I expect you to be doing 85 units an hour for this particular task. And they say, that's ridiculous. That's not attainable. Yeah. You better be able to say, no, it is attainable. And let's talk about the team members that we might be able to team you with that can show you how that is attainable. There are plenty of times where we have customers that do have engineering standards that for whatever reason, the population isn't lining up with. And so Takt actually points those out. Don't come back every 6 months or hire your engineering team to come back and do every time study in the facility over again. Look for the ones that we highlight as red because no person in your team in the past 6 months has ever come close to this standard. That probably warrants taking a look at. Likewise, if you've got a standard that's so soft that everybody's report is saying that they're at 160% efficiency, humans tend to not really care as much once they exceed 100%. It's like, is there an A+++++? Is there anything in it for me? If not, make an adjustment. Go figure out what procedural change took place and make the adjustment. I think there's a reason. There's a bigger picture behind your question, and that is the challenges of introducing a program like this. And I think that any tool that includes additional visibility, and with visibility comes accountability, the success of that tool, that program, that implementation, it comes down to one thing, and I'm gonna say it's adoption. Yeah. And that's because an unused labor management system is a useless labor management system. Yeah. It's just a cost. There will be no results if people aren't using it. And so a lot of times the way that these were introduced to organizations and the frontline workforce as something was happening to them, not with them, right? And that's just not how you create continuous improvement. You've got to get the team in a situation where they believe what they're seeing. They understand how they fit in. They understand that they can affect change and that they're going to use the platform. They're going to embrace the platform. I always like to say, we build some really impressive software at Takt, but it can't jump off the screen and take the actions that it's pointing to. We still need folks to take the necessary actions there. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like you're leading the horse to the water, right? When the horse you gotta drink it. That's exactly right. So, that's a great analogy. I think it makes total sense. And I think that adoption needs to be there. And it is certainly like a mind shift change, but I think putting the proper tools in place, like a Takt, certainly helps to make it easier to make that shift and that change because you have the insights, like you have the data, the visibility now. And it's just about like, okay, taking that action to say like, okay, this is where we need to improve, and this is where we're underutilized, or this is where we're overutilized, and figuring that out and really understanding. How do we take this and improve this and move this operation forward and evolve over time? And I think that's really important. Absolutely. As we continue a conversation around how we got into this business and some of the upfront decisions that were made, adoption was a key one. And there are really two elements to adoption, I think, that have been some of the biggest challenges historically for tools in this space. The first is an easy one to understand, and that is integration. If you can't get all of the systems together and connected and provide data that is defensible and accurate, like stop, that's foundational. But that's easier said than done. I mean, operations have widely varying systems. Take third-party logistics companies. We talk to third-party logistics companies, and it is not uncommon for them to have their own WMS, but they've also taken over a facility or a portion of a facility for a number of clients who require them to use a different WMS. And so we had to build the platform in a way that is configurable, not customizable, so that even if you have 4 WMSs and 3 different time card systems and a couple of other automation systems producing data, that we can get all of that hooked up, connected, and up and running in 4 weeks. So that's the integration side. I think maybe more importantly is once you've got integrated, which is table stakes, the use of the platform, right? The use side of adoption, we knew that we had to build a modern application. Nobody picks up manuals anymore and expects to have to read a manual to understand how to use something. You pick up your phone, you download an app. The general expectation is that you can figure out how to use it. And so we've certainly built Takt with that in mind. But I think the other piece is there are some very different users in a fulfillment operation, and they have very, very different ways that they want to interact with these tools, right? And very different comfort levels with technology. You got engineers and continuous improvement teams on our platform that want to slice and dice the data. They want to use filters and pivots. They want to use it like a BI tool. You got operators and managers. They don't have that time. Like any time that they spend in our platform is time that they aren't out on the floor doing the most important work. And so they need more of a, can you give me a quick glance at my entire team or my performance so that I can, quickly determine if there's something that I need to take. I don't want to be double sorting, columns, and I don't want to be doing VLOOKUPs. Like, just give me what I need to know and let me get back on there. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the credit of that, all the credit, at least in the Takt platform, goes to our engineering product teams. Like, they are spending an inordinate amount of time with customers to understand their needs, their expectations, and their individual capabilities of all these different user groups.
Yeah, I think that's such a key point because it's so important on that user interface, user experience side to, especially when you mentioned the warehouse manager there. I mean, the average warehouse manager is not typically like a totally analytical, data centric type of person. I mean, I've worked with warehouse managers, had ones that have worked for me, supervisors that have worked for me. And yeah, I mean, they've told me like, I hate Excel, right? I mean, so I mean, you don't necessarily want to dive into that and figure out the detail. And like you said, like, if you're being, an effective leader in the warehouse and you're on the floor, like you're not sitting in front of the desk all day long. You're out there with the people and making sure things are getting done and moving along. Right. So being able to quickly see those insights and understand quickly, where am I at right now without having to do a lot of, like you said, filtering or sorting through data or, pivot table, this and that, all these different things. I mean, it is so key to them adopting it too on their side, right? And then using that to drive the actions that they need to take as a leader on the floor is very important. So it's really great that you guys have focused on that. And I think that's such a key point, as well as we see more, we talked about the younger generations like coming in too, right? I mean, even that is like very important to have that user experience, because you look at everything that they're using in their daily lives and, how easy is it to use an app on my cell phone? Like, if I come into the workplace and I've grown up using these apps that are super easy to use, and then I go to a system and, it's like,
it looks like a console from 1990.
Yeah. I'm going to be like, what is going on here? Right. Like, this is crazy. Like, they would be like, oh, this is vintage, right? Or something.
Vintage. That's a polite word.
So, yeah, I mean, it's so important to be able to have that. So, I mean, tell us a little bit too, from the Takt perspective, because labor management systems, I mean, have been around for a long time, and there's different iterations of them and different variations, whether they're packaged in with a WMS as well, or standalone, or branch off a telematics platform or something like that. I mean, tell us, I guess, from the Takt perspective, like what's different about this? Is this like the new age LMS, and what's the difference about that, and how does it kind of contrast to some of those other ones?
Well, I think a big piece of it is going to be in the observations and feedback element of the platform. There is a lot of let me take a minute and talk about
Sure.
the goals, about what results are we trying to drive, right? What are the measurable specific results that we're trying to drive? And those fall into really three categories. One, pretty specifically, is easy to understand, and that's cost reduction. And when we talk about cost reduction, very straightforward, right? We're talking about measurable reductions in time off task, startup time, shutdown time, increasing efficiency and utilization. Those are easily measurable. They're easy to point to a line item on a P&L and say, this is where we saved. The other piece of it is employee engagement. And there are certainly cost savings associated with reducing your turnover and retaining your top talent. But the value of an engaged workforce goes well beyond just cost savings. And I'll give you a great example. We did a study at the end of 2022 looking across 10,000 or more frontline workers on our platform and found that the ones that had regular feedback, right? And feedback can be just general feedback. It can be coaching. It can be kudos. It can be a check-in. But those that had some form of regular feedback every 30 days or so were 18 to 24% more productive. And so I think one of the realizations and certainly one of the fundamental principles of when we built Takt was you don't just get to the results you're looking for by telling people to work 20% harder or else. There are opportunities to create a more engaged workforce. You can get a lot of productivity improvement just by aligning people with where they are most proficient. Our platform does a great job of painting Kevin's shift today, right? As you run through your shift today, I can see very easily, here's when the shift started, here's when you clocked in, Kevin got right to work within 8 or 9 minutes, here's what he's been doing, he's switched departments a couple of times. But that's like watching somebody bat once. I know a little bit about Kevin if I've seen him bat once. But when you start stacking up shifts over time and Takt builds up a baseball card on you effectively. And so I can look and say, not today or yesterday, I can say, what about Kevin over the last 4 weeks or the last 4 months or the last year? Where has he worked? Where is he proficient? Where is he growing? You would be surprised, or maybe not, at the number of times where people are just being put into roles where they have consistently showed you, if you have the data, that they are far less comfortable, far less efficient. And by just moving people around to the places where they're more productive, they're more proficient, and in most cases where they prefer to be, you can get a whole bunch of improvement by doing things that way. So we do place a heavy focus in the platform on communicating these types of things with the employee, not just, managers. We've got to get this information in their hands. And it's one of the reasons that we've leaned into things like generative AI. We can talk about that a little bit. I know that's one of the things you and I have talked about, but that's a big part of the platform. The other thing that I think is really unique and that we're seeing, maybe we didn't even expect when we started building the platform, was the use of the data now that we've aggregated it all by the engineers and the continuous improvement teams. Most operations have teams that are focused on, engineering standards, maintaining engineering standards, processes, identifying opportunities for continuous improvement. And so we can make their lives a lot easier by highlighting the areas and the opportunities where they can focus their efforts. So again, I mentioned engineering standards. Should you go review them all, or maybe focus on the ones where something indicates that something's changed? If you're considering a large capital investment in goods to person or collaborative robotics, we can help you understand and help these teams understand what the likely impact of that's going to be. And even better, help you measure what the actual output of that is when you put it in there, and identify what other adjustments you may want to make in your operation to get the most out of your capital investments. I got one more thing, and that is I'd be remiss if I didn't speak highly of our customer success team and the way that we work with customers. When we're not a professional services company, we don't offer any professional services. We don't charge any hourly rates, but our approach to engagements has a very consulting mindset, a focus on timeframes and specific measurable results. We are an ROI play. And if we're not driving the ROI that our customers expect, they're not going to stay with us. And so regular communication is a part of everything that we do at Takt. We talk to our customers every week, every quarter. We do a quarterly business review with them, and it's an opportunity to say, hey, these are the measurements we're seeing. This is the progress we're seeing, and what are the priorities moving forward? Where are the largest opportunities for additional savings or improvement?
Yeah. And I think that's so important too. I mean, to be able to communicate, like you said, and be able to identify those areas where you can make different decisions and changes to be able to improve overall is so important. And the fact that you're so engaged on the customer side to be able to help them to understand that and help them, okay, like we see this, but what does it mean? Right. I mean, to be able to help them understand that and get the wheels turning a little bit on how we could address certain challenges we may be facing that the data is showing us, is a great thing to be able to do that. So you did mention the AI in there. So I'm very curious to talk about this a little bit and tell us a little bit about the AI side of things from a Takt perspective and how you guys are leveraging it.
Yeah, sure. Now you're getting into the really exciting stuff. I'm gonna have to try and not go on too long about this. First of all, let's get it out of the way. I think I heard somebody on one of your podcasts mention this before. Everybody says AI. There are a lot of people that are using business rules and statistical inference, not really using AI. So one of the ways that we've got started with AI is that we're using generative AI to help humans communicate better. And I never say that without recognizing the irony that we're going to use machines to help humans talk to each other better. but it is one of the coolest things. It's one of the things we're most excited about. And really, it's just getting started. But in most of the operations we go into, the frontline workers receive feedback maybe a couple of times a year, if at all.
Yeah.
And I think what's ironic is the incoming workforce, the millennials, the Gen Z, they're the ones who more than anyone expect regular feedback and coaching.
Oh, yeah.
But now as they move into management roles, what's really interesting is they don't really enjoy, nor do they like having the tougher conversations. They expect the conversations, but they don't necessarily feel very comfortable giving them. And I'll give you a funny story. We had a customer that when we started with them, they had a very low percentage of their workforce that had received any feedback on any consistent basis. And they said, hey, we want to change that. So they said, we're going to make that a top priority. Now, all of your observations and kudos and feedback sessions and even safety and discussions and things like that happen in the Takt platform. And there are dashboards that show you exactly, how many have been done by what department, what shift, what manager, et cetera. So this customer, let's just use a number. Let's say we have 1,000 people in the facility and they said, I want to be talking to 75% of my people on a monthly basis. Great. So you got 1,000 people in there. They said, I want to see this facility do 750 coaching sessions. Great. They set that goal. We came back a couple of months and we were doing the QBR with them and we said, here's the thing. You did way more than 750. It was 800 and something observations and feedback sessions and kudos and everything like that. But our data is telling us that still far less than 50% of your people have had any communication in the last 6 months. You know what was happening? The people were going to the same group of people who were performing very well and having 3 or 4 conversations with them and avoiding all conversations with the folks that actually needed it. And so you're getting a little insight into the way that the Takt platform advances and evolves is we had to go back and go, okay, counting feedback observations is not the solution here. We need to go in and say, Kevin, the individual, right, hasn't had feedback. And so now, your employees get a little orange tag as they approach the need for feedback. They turn, they get a little red tag if they're overdue for feedback. But that's how our product evolves. And so we looked at that, we made that change. But getting into the AI side of things, we asked ourselves, why are people so afraid of having some of these conversations? And it's because the folks that we're expecting to lead these conversations, they've probably had little or no, specific training in having effective coaching conversations or feedback conversations. You worked on the floor for a year or two, you showed some promise. Now, congratulations, you're in charge of 20 people on the floor. And so we looked at using generative AI and created something that we've dubbed Takt Coach. And so what that does is, it looks across all of the data that would normally require a manager to go in and ask a lot of questions. And so we feed it the data. And let's say I'm going to have a conversation with Kevin. What it does is it goes and looks at, how's Kevin doing today? How's Kevin done over the past quarter? How's Kevin done since the last time we talked to him? What progress is made? And it puts together a checklist of suggested topics that says, Kevin has made significant improvements as an efficiency since his last performance review, but his his startup time still leaves something to be desired. He still is far below the average colleague in the facility on getting started, but he's having a spectacular day today, right? Yeah. So it helps somebody feel very comfortable walking up and saying, these are some things you should cover. But then you also have the qualitative write-ups that people do. And these are some of the most interesting write-ups that we ever saw. But, a lot of times people don't know how to balance quantitative and qualitative feedback in a write-up like that. In fact, there's a true story. I just wrote a blog about it. Is one of the first pieces of paper that we saw in an early customer was a management review where somebody just basically said, Kevin ain't having it today. That was the entire review. It had no discernible value or metrics or anything. Yeah. That was the entirety of the review. And so we said, okay, how can we also use generative AI to help people work through that? And so what Takt Coach does is it analyzes the write-up that you're giving, and then it makes suggestions, and it'll say a lot of different things. If I went up and I said I'm going to give Kevin kudos, because you can select the type of feedback you're giving. If I said that I'm going to give Kevin kudos and then I write up a scathing review, it'll highlight and say, this doesn't seem to match the intent of this conversation.
The kudos.
And then the other piece is it's going to help you say, like, let's throw some metrics in here. Let's make sure this is a balance of quantitative and qualitative sentiment. And so, that's a fairly new release. We released that a couple of months ago, but I'll tell you, it's one of the most exciting things. We are already seeing it help new managers have far more effective coaching conversations and provide better feedback to the teams out there.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I love that application of AI. I mean, I think that makes so much sense because that is such a challenging thing to do. I mean, and I think your example was great. I mean, it's easy to tell someone they're doing a fantastic job, right? It's harder to approach somebody and tell them and say, you're not doing so great, right? I mean, so the ability to be able to see, like, okay, how do I get my points together to be able to tailor this conversation so that it's not only, either way, it's going to be somewhat of a negative conversation, right? But at least you're able to, provide some points and say, like, maybe I could see that, hey, like, 2 weeks ago, like, your performance was pretty well. And then, it seems like you dropped off, like, what's going on? Like, has something happened? And you can point out significant points in the timeline of saying, like, this is what we're seeing here. And then, and then that opens up the conversation, I think, a little more to when you approach somebody and you're just like, hey, you're 20% under, like, what's going on? Right. They're just like, well, this and that, and this, and, there was a line at the bathroom and all these things. Right. I mean, I've heard a million excuses. Like, so I think being able to tailor that and have a better way to approach overall, I think is a great thing. And I think it's great too that on the write-up side and the review side that, it's giving you that feedback as well to say, like, okay, this is reflective of, what's actually going on. Because I mean, I've certainly had some supervisors and managers that have reported to me, and I look at their reviews and I'm like, this person's not really hitting their numbers, but you're saying, like, they're a hard worker and this and that, and I'm kind of like, what's really going on here? So being able to have that, I think, is such a great thing, and I think it's such a great use of AI. And like you said, I mean, I see it in my students now, like that. And I guess it's, because they've grown up just, texting, DMing and all these things, right? That it's, having those conversations is a little more difficult, and, trying to like coax them out of their shell, even to network and things like that, I mean, is difficult. So being able to give them tools into how to have those conversations, like you said, when they start to move into those leadership positions and receive that feedback too, I mean, I think is such a really good thing. So I mean, it sounds like it's a great product, I would say. I mean, I think it's such a useful use case for the AI itself to be able to do that and put that in your back pocket as a warehouse manager and be able to utilize that tool to give that feedback better. Because, you know, it's very important that you give that feedback overall and consistently as well. And that's the way you help people to improve, or, you know, or ultimately, you know, if maybe, you know, Kevin ain't having it today, or maybe Kevin ain't having it, you know, for a month long or something, you can make those decisions and say like, hey, this person they're in it or they're not in it. Right.
Yeah. Hopefully also save some HR departments from heart attacks too, because, you know, especially when you have new regulations and sunshine laws that really force the need to defend not only standards and quotas, but any type of coaching or feedback that you've provided. You can't have, you know, unreviewed or unprofessional write-ups there. And so I think that it really is about helping these managers become better managers quickly. And so, yeah, it's great. It's something very exciting. And again, I know we're just scratching the surface. I know the engineering team is already working on the next uses of both generative and some of the other AI capabilities.
Awesome. And we'll definitely be looking forward to learning about all those new future improvements and everything that's going on. So I want to thank you, Glynn, for coming on the show today and talking to me all about labor issues, labor management, and the Takt platform itself. Very interesting discussion. Very interesting to get these insights from you. If people are interested in learning more about Takt, what's the best way to do that?
Check us out online at Takt, TAKT.io. You're always free to reach out to me, Glynn, that's GLYNN at Takt.io. But yeah, reach out, hit us on LinkedIn. We would love to tell you more about what we do. And if there's an opportunity to serve anybody and help out with the operations out there, we'd love to learn more.
All right, great. I'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So, Glynn, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.